ancestors are from, I should say. The ones that are there are non-communicative at this point.
Okay, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It is the 10th of August, 2005, approximately 9:45 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Roger Evans Bradley. I was born in Sharon, Connecticut, April 23rd, 1932.
And what was your educational background prior to entering service?
I had 12 years of schooling, graduate
Okay.
Milton High School.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted
And when were you drafted?
August 21st, 1952.
Okay, and you were drafted into the Army?
Yes.
All right, where did you go for your basic training?
Fort Lee, Virginia.
Tell us a little bit about your basic.
Yes, I did 8 weeks of basic, and then I had 8 weeks of materials handling. It was the headquarters for the Quartermaster Corps. And when I graduated from that, I went on to advanced Quartermaster Storage and graduated from that, and from there I went to Korea.
Okay, so what was your total amount of specialized training?
Specialized training would be 16 weeks.
16 weeks, okay.
Yes.
When you went to Korea, when did you go to Korea?
March of 53.
Okay. Now, how did you go to Korea?
I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and from there by ship, the USS Marine Lynx. It was a Liberty ship. Kaiser coffins, we called them. They're very small, and there was approximately 3,000 GIs on the ship, and we had kind of a rough trip over, and we kind of joked because the ship would do the in and outs, and the rudders would come out of the water, and the thing would shake, and our joke was that it was pulling up tree stumps as it progressed. And it went from there to Yokohama.
How long did your trip take?
I really don't recall.
Okay.
Now, were you assigned to a unit before you left?
No, I went in as what they call pipeline replacement.
Okay. So you went into Yokohama?
Yes.
How long were you there?
Camp Drake one night, back on the same ship and into Incheon.
All right. What was it like when you went into Korea? What were your impressions?
Well, we knew we were going to Incheon, and of course the invasion had taken place at Incheon, and we were kind of antsy about that, but everything was secure by the time we got there. We could hear the guns, but there was no combat in the areas that we were in. We were boarded onto trains and sent to a replacement depot in Busan.
How long were you there before you were assigned to a unit?
Well, one day.
Okay. What unit were you assigned to?
I was assigned to the 8201st Army Unit, which was at that time was the UNCAC, United Nations Korea Civil Assistance Command. And that later was shortened to Korea Civil Assistance Command, KCAC.
Okay, could you tell us about this command? What its purpose was and what they did? I think you're the first person we've interviewed that was with it.
It was a unique organization. It was designed to create stability among the refugees, the war going back and forth up and down the peninsula. Needless to say, the refugees were all around, and our job was to concentrate them, establish a living area for them, and create services for them. Governmental, work with the Korean government actually, and establish an infrastructure. Also, our purpose was to bring relief goods into the refugees.
Did you have much personal contact with them?
No. My assignment when I got there, I was immediately assigned to an orderly room, or not orderly room, I'm sorry, supply room, And the first sergeant came in a couple days after I was there, and I was sitting at a typewriter typing. And his comment was, "I didn't know you could type. Pick up your desk and chair and typewriter and come to the orderly room. You're our new company clerk." So that's where I spent my 16 months, headquarters company clerk. So I had very little hands-on with the personnel. The only hands-on I had, the people that we picked up at the replacement depot for the various teams would come through us. They would be headquarters with us until they were assigned to whatever province they were going to. We had teams all over the
Now, how many
area.
in a team approximately? I mean, I imagine they varied in number.
It did vary. It depended on the size, I suppose, and I really don't know the
Okay.
TO on
All right, now,
something like that.
what would one of these teams do in the area where they were assigned?
They would have direct involvement with the civilians in the area and whatever governing body there was in the area, to see to the supply of relief goods, also the water supply and the agriculture and sanitation and the whole gamut of a community or a government.
Now, did they themselves establish the government, or was it
No.
already a government body established?
The Koreans had their own government. Sigmund Rhee was the
Yes,
president.
yes, I
and-
realize that, but I meant on
Exactly.
these lower levels.
No, the provinces were established.
Mhm.
And we just assisted those government agencies.
Basically, as a company clerk, you were the first sergeant's right-hand man.
Exactly.
Did you enjoy that position?
Yeah, it had a lot of perks.
Uh-huh.
I became very close to the first sergeant and the CO, actually. Very close. The first sergeant was a lieutenant colonel in the reserves. He was a captain during the Normandy invasion. He had 29 and a half years service when I got there. And he was there for like maybe another 6 months or so before he rotated home. And we got another first sergeant. He was a unique individual.
In what ways?
He knew the military inside out and backwards. Anything, uniform code of military justice, he could almost quote it verbatim. Something would happen, he would know directly where to go in the book to find the regulation that covered it. He just knew the military. Our headquarters company was on a maritime college right on the Bay of Pusan. We were right on the beach. And we were also, that compound also housed the POW command, prisoner of war command. So we had two one-star generals plus all the officers that went with that. Our particular unit, we had 2 officers for every enlisted man. And these plus a lot of Department of the Army civilians in the various sections that.
Now, were
ran
these
this operation.
civilians Korean or non-Korean?
They were American.
American?
Yeah. They call them DACs, Department of the Army civilians. And they had a GS rating, which would give them a military elevation. I don't know the breakdown anymore. I used to. But
Now, were you armed at all where you were?
when we first got there, if we left the compound, yes. Yeah. Whenever I went out, I always had a sidearm, and I also carried an M2 carbine, which was a select fire automatic weapon. And I own one now, not a select fire, which is, of course, against the law. But my son gave me one a few years ago for Christmas. It was quite a surprise.
What did you think of the M1 carbine?
If I was in combat, I certainly wouldn't have wanted it. I would want something with a little more firepower. The M1 certainly had the knockdown. The M1 was designed to be used by service personnel in place of a 45. It just had a little more knockdown than a 45 and gave you a little more firepower. And it was light. It was easy for truck drivers and company clerks and cooks and whatnot to use in the event that you needed it.
Now, did you have a POW camp near you?
No. No, we just had headquarters company.
Headquarters company,
Yeah.
okay. What was daily life like?
It was like a 9-to-5 office job. All the enlisted personnel worked in the various sections, and they would go out in the morning at 8 o'clock to their various offices and work until 4, and then they came back. We had reveille, and we had our mess and whatnot, so we did have that in the morning, assembly. And then from 8 o'clock until 4, it was like office job. We had retreat at whatever time it was, 4:30 maybe. And from then on, you were on your own. You went to chow and did whatever you wanted until reveille the next morning.
What kind of quarters did you have?
We had Quonset huts.
Quonset huts.
And we had maybe a dozen men to a hut. As company clerk, one of my functions was to get up in the morning and go into the orderly room. And we had a PA system with a turntable, and I would use a recorded bugle calls. So I would play the reveille, and then we would have martial music until assembly, and then I would go back in and play the assembly and bugle call, and we would all fall in for our assembly. This went on morning after morning after morning. The first sergeant would report to the CO, and the CO would report to the headquarters commandant, all present and accounted for, whatever the situation may be. And headquarters commandant was a lieutenant colonel. And this went on for months, the same music every morning. And you can imagine all these officers and everybody listening to this. And finally, we also on the compound had an AFRS, Armed Forces Radio Service station. So I went down there one morning and I said, this music is, getting to me. And I said, the guys were complaining a little bit. And I said, do you have anything that I might be able to play that would kind of temper this thing off? And see, I think I do. And he came up with a Glenn Miller recording of Song of the Vulgar Boatsman, American on Patrol, and Little Brown Jug. So I said, well, it may be brig time, but I'm going to do it. So I played it. And that morning, after we fell in and everything, and all the reports were in, the CO, or the headquarters commandant, Lieutenant Colonel, wanted to know who played the music. He asked the CO, who was a major at the time, and he turned around and he asked the first sergeant. The first sergeant asked me, please step out, and I said, here it comes. And all he said was, thank you very much. We appreciate it. From then on, I played whatever I could scarf up from the AFRS. So we had a lot of humor.
What kind of food did you have there? You must have had hot meals rather than the...
Yes, we did. We had a good mess, and you had good mess cooks, and it was an established college, so we had their kitchen facilities, and it was good food.
You didn't have powdered eggs? Or occasionally?
We probably did. None of us pulled KP. All KP was done by Korean nationals, so you'd have scrambled eggs. I didn't see any fried eggs, so I have to assume most of them were powdered.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you have to pull guard duty at all?
Yes.
What was that like?
We had guard towers, and you pulled it on a roster basis. And were you ever in military?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then you know what guard duty is. We would have the supernumeraries and all the deal. We had a main gate that was staffed by MPs that were part of our unit, and we would supplement them. The towers, I actually pulled tower duty, and that was interesting because there was a village not too far from us, and I recall one night that I was there, and I could see movement in this open field coming toward me on hands and knees, or crawling toward me. And I watched and watched and watched, and whoever it was a Korean, obviously. He was wearing a white shirt. Why anybody would infiltrate with a white shirt on, I don't know. And it was a moonlit night. I had a pretty good vision on him. So I watched and watched and watched him come, and finally when he got within pretty good earshot, I just slammed a bolt on the rifle, and he stood up and made a beeline right back to where it came from. So, you know, it was funny. I knew it was probably a houseboy or something coming in to pick up something that he may have planted that he stole during the day. We called them slicky boys. You know, they were. That's the only thing I could figure out. I would never have shot him because that's what I thought it was.
Was there a lot of black market activity?
Oh yeah, yeah. While I was there, they had a script change, and all the military personnel were asked to report to their units immediately. Of course, we had no idea what it was, and being the company clerk, I scooted on back into the compound. I think it was on a Sunday. Anyway, I was out in the village, and in Seoul at the time, and we had moved our headquarters. And I got back into headquarters, and they told me what it was, and everybody was asked to come in and turn in whatever script they had, and they were given a receipt for it. And when the money was exchanged, we would call them back in and repay them. And we had a big blanket on the floor, and we just threw all this money in there. And we had quite a pile of money. So we tied up the blanket. The CO and myself and the head of the security guard, which was our MP, took this money down to finance. Before, when I was also the armorer, and we could draw any weapon we wanted. And I always wanted to be kind of a cowboy, and we had a .45 revolver, and I had a barrel, I don't know. We didn't even have a holster big enough for it. So I tucked it in my pants, and it came almost to my knee. So we got there, and I went with the driver to park the vehicle, and they went on in the building. Well, the building had no steps. They had pulled them in, and you came up to a dock. So you're looking at the dock, vehicle height. So I come back and have this gun in my hand. I knock on the door. Wrong move. The MP took one look, and I said, whoa, wait a minute. You know, I'm here on official business, and I told him who I was, and he verified it, and they let me in. But never gave it a thought. Had all this money in there. I'm staying there with a cannon.
Did you ever get any R&R?
No. R&R was available. I figured I was on R&R there, so I just never took it.
How many USO shows at all?
We didn't have any. They went to the frontline troops, and rightly so. So we really didn't get any of them.
How long were you there until what date?
I came out of Korea in July of '54. I was in Korea 16 months.
Do you, how did you feel, or did you have any feelings at all about MacArthur's relief?
Well, it's hard to put that into perspective now, but we kind of thought we should go all the way, but what did we care? We're back in a safe area, you know, the Bay of Pusan, what did we care? But anyway, we felt that he should have been allowed to take the whole of Korea and Manchuria if he wanted to, but Truman didn't want that.
Yeah, well, that was the feeling of the troops, I think, at the time. So,
Yeah.
okay. Did you ever have, the Army was integrated at this time? Did you have blacks in your unit at all?
Sure. Had them in basic training.
How were the relationships?
It was an eye-opener for me being from the North. I have always lived in a segregated society. I had some good friends in school that were black, and never gave it a thought. And when I got to Fort Lee, Virginia, it was kind of like the Mason-Dixon line was drawn in the barracks. I was an acting platoon sergeant. And I would march the troops back and forth to the various classes that we had. And that was up to me to select an assistant. And I selected a black kid. He was a sharp soldier and, just a good guy. And that was a wrong move. But I survived that. And then he and I went into Petersburg on furlough one night. And we got off the bus. And
Was he a northerner?
No, he wasn't. We started out, fortunately, we started to walk down the street, and he said, I'll see you. I said, where are you going? He said, you walk over there, I'm going to walk over here. And I said, well, why can't we? He says, that's not the way it is here. And that was really an awakening to me. And the next day, when we were back in camp, I spoke to him about it, and he just informed me that's the way of the South. So the military was segregated, but it wasn't. The first sergeant was biased, to say the least. I had an instance one time where I had to go down to replacement depot and pick up a first lieutenant. So we had Jeep station wagons, and I would request a vehicle, and I had a Korean driver. And the first sergeant told me, he said, now this first lieutenant you're picking up is black. He rides in the back. You ride in the front. You're in command of the vehicle. You have requisition drawn the vehicle. You ride in the front. So, okay. Again, from the north, not thinking anything, down I go. But doing what the first sergeant told me, I go in and Lieutenant Johnson, and he said, right here, my bag is over there. And I said, the Jeep is out there. And I turned around and walked out. And he came out and he started getting in front. I said, I'm sorry, Lieutenant. I said, you have to ride in the back. The vehicle is assigned to me, and it's required that I ride up front. Again, not thinking that that they had to ride in the back, or that the blacks were in the South riding in the back. And then I thought about it later, and I said that really should have been. I should have jumped in the back and gave difference to the rank. But hindsight is 20/20. Because whenever I would meet him on the compound, it really wasn't friendly. But, and again, it was a case where we never saluted the officers for the simple reason that there were too many of them. And they told us, don't salute us. We don't want to be saluted. So we just, rank was nothing to us over there. Absolutely nothing. After the war was over, we had an NCO club, which was a regular small Quonset. And we had so much money amassed that we spent it on a new Quonset, jumbo Quonset. And we had a beautiful NCO club, hardwood floors, and just everything. It was far surpassed what the officers had. And many of them wanted to come there, so we told them, take your brass off at the door, and you're more than welcome to come in. And that they did. So we had a good time with them. It was an experience. I mean, there was no heroics on my part. I had no combat. I didn't shoot anybody, which I find interesting with kids when we do programs in schools like Veterans Day. A bunch of us went the first. Did you ever shoot anybody? No, I didn't.
Do you have any incidences, you related some, that you thought were humorous while you were over there? Or things that stand out, maybe not humorous, that stand out a little bit?
Our frog jumping contests were a lot of fun. We would go to the NCO club at night, and we would get 2 bottles of beer. We drank Japanese beer. It was Asahi or Nippon. And we would get 2 glasses, and we would fill one and put a frog in it. There were frogs all over the place. And we'd just submerge them in the beer and let them sit there for an hour or so. Then we would take them out, we'd line them up, and we would bet whose frog would hit the wall at the other end. And that first leap that they made was spectacular when they came to. So that was a little humor. We were always joking among ourselves, the guys. We were from all over the world, or country, so. Our NCO club brought in a lot of foreign troops also.
I was going to ask if you had any
Yeah.
contact with foreign troops.
Yeah, the British came in all the time. They loved our NCO club, and they loved cold beer. We were invited to theirs when we went, and they get it out of the back room, and so I could see why they liked to come to our club. They were always cordial. Any of them that came in were great. The Turks would come in once in a while. They were kind of menacing type. I mean, they would have knives in their belts, and they were tough soldiers. But they were cordial.
Okay, when did you go home?
I left. My orders were cut on 6 July 1954. I went to Busan Replacement Depot, and from there I boarded a troop transport. It was a USS General Randolph general ship, which was great to come back on because it was a big two-stacker. And we went from Busan to Sasebo and picked up civilians there and came home. And the thing that we didn't like was they had chain link fence segregating us from the civilians, and
On the ship?
we were relegated to the worst of the decks. If I can, not being a sailor, I don't know so much about it. But anyway, it just seemed that the civilians had
Now, who were
priority.
the civilians? Just
Department of the Army civilians. They may be officers' wives or even enlisted men's wives coming back to the States. Japan was an occupied country at the time, so there was a lot of occupation troops there. And that kind of rattled our chain a little bit. But we survived. It was going home was the thing that, and that was interesting. We landed in Seattle. And as we debarked, we were told not to cross any ropes. They had all roped off on the dock, and we were told to go down and report to wherever we were supposed to go. And there were some family there to meet the guys, and naturally the rope didn't mean anything. Over they went, and nothing was done. They finally corralled them and got them back in line, but I can understand what they were doing. So we boarded airplanes for our various destinations. So I came back to Camp Kilmer and was discharged, separated in Camp Kilmer in around the end of July, I guess. Let's see, no, it was probably the second week in July I was out of there.
now, did you stay in until 60?
No, I did not. I chose inactive reserve, and then I had a bunch of buddies that I palled around with, and a couple of cousins. In Canaan, Connecticut, there was a reserve unit, and they begged me to come in. And the CO, I got to know him, and he needed a company clerk. So I joined the thing, and I stayed about 9 months, and this military's enough. I've had enough of it. And I just resigned from that unit and became inactive for the remainder of my tenure.
Okay. So in 60, you then, that was the end of your,
Exactly.
Inactive
That's
time,
when I
okay.
received my discharge.
all right. Did you ever join any veterans organizations?
Yes. American Legion. My dad was a Legionnaire, very devout. He was a charter member of the Lakeville, Connecticut post, and he was active in chartering neighboring posts. This is back in the 20s. He was a Marine Corps veteran of World War I. So he had me enrolled in the American Legion, I think, before the ship docked. So I just celebrated 51 years in the Legion. I've held every office and within the post, twice a past commander, and I was a county vice commander. I'm a life member of the VFW. I joined the post in Great Barrington, Mass. There being none around the Millerton area. Millerton is a tri-state area. New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts come together in that township that I live in. I joined the Korean War Veterans Association and the Columbia County chapter, and we're housed in Hudson, New York. And that was a newly formed chapter. I think we're only about 4 years old. Yeah, 4 years old.
Did you ever make use of the GI Bill?
No. The only association I have is VA Hospital. I went back into my old job. I was a clerk for A&P, and I saw a career as a grocer. And I stayed in that for a few years. Then I went to work for the state of New York as a security officer at a mental health institution. And then I said that there's no future here. And I became a salesman for Suburban Propane Gas Corporation. And I retired from North American Van Lines, where I was a relocation consultant. And I enjoyed being out on the road and talking to people and getting away from the confinement of a store.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Maturity, to say the least. Milton being a very close.
Was that the first time you were ever really away from home when you went into service?
Other than Boy Scout camp, yeah, I think so. We're from there. I'm one of 8 kids, the 4th oldest. I have 6 sisters. I have a brother who was a sailor in World War II. Just that was my life, and that's where I wanted to come back to. But since then, North American Van Lines, I went to Las Vegas, and I worked there for a couple of years, and then came back to the Albany area. I worked out of Poughkeepsie, that you referred to earlier, for Arnoff Moving and Storage. That was the agent for North American Van Lines. And I went to, as I said, Las Vegas. I was there 2 years, came back to Albany, and went into the office that they have here in Albany, Arnoff Moving and Storage. And then I retired from there in 1996.
Okay, could you tell us, if you just maybe hold these up in front of you like this, Wayne can focus on them. I know they're delicate. What are those?
While I was company clerk, the CO decided that we should have a company paper, and it should be highlights of what was going on within the headquarters and what was going on within the field teams. So this was a weekly deal, and I have volume 1, edition 17. I don't know how that happened, but I guess, well, yeah, that's the year, I guess. Anyway, there's several.
Now, did you do any of the
issues here.
writing for it?
Yeah. Very little. We had some very talented people. In the fact that we were a headquarters company, we had a lot of high-ranking NCOs, master sergeants and whatnot, who had really been around and knew the military. And the stories that they contributed were of great interest to us, and a lot of them were regional, things that happened around the thing. And on this one, you see Sergeant Frederick E. Sweat. He was one of the NCOs, and every week they would do a feature on one of these NCOs, and the first sergeant is in here somewhere.
Do you want to just hold that up and I'll zoom in on it?
Yeah, these are over 50 years old. This edition is 1953, so almost 50 is 48, I guess. December 5th. I
Okay.
think this is the last issue that I have. I think the first one probably predates this. Somewhere in here. Anyway, the also included in here, we had a very talented illustrator who would do cartoons on each section, and they were humorous. Some of our more illustrious members they would highlight in here, and it was,
Okay.
these were looked after. When I say some of our illustrious, we had a corporal who worked in the motor pool, Corporal Luth, and I was fortunate to have him as a neighbor in my bunk in my headquarters, my Quonset. He was a scrounger. If you needed anything, he could find it. It was what we would call midnight requisitions. And for some reason this was one of the incidents, we were missing gas caps. And our motor pool had deuce and a halves and all nature vehicles, and they needed gas caps. So the motor officer, who was a major, asked him while he was down at Ordnance if he couldn't see if he could get some gas caps. Well, Supply didn't have any, so he said, well, I'm not going back without them. So he had a weapons carrier, and he parked it in with a whole bunch of other weapons carriers, and he started down through collecting gas caps. He had fatigues with big carbon pockets, and he put them in there. And an officer spotted him and hollered at him. He jumped in a Jeep that was handy and took off around the motor pool, and the officer did the same thing. And he kind of outfoxed him and got back to his weapons carrier, jumped in it, and headed back to the compound. Well, this officer got his markings off the bumper, and Luth came back into headquarters and told the major what had happened. And he said, well, pull it down there. And he said the mechanics down, he says, pull the motor out of that vehicle immediately. Down they go, and they pulled the motor. And by the time the MPs came down, the vehicle was over there stripped. And he said, it couldn't possibly be this one. There's no motor in it. Here's the paperwork back when he fudged the paperwork 3 days ago. So he got away with it. But it was, this is the type of thing you could do. The major wanted to have a party for some of his more select enlisted personnel, me being one, unfortunately. And he wanted to have a steak fry. And he thought filet mignon would be good. Now, where in the heck are you going to get filet mignon in Korea? So anyway, he got Luth in there, and Luth says, well, let me see what I can do. So he went down to ration breakdown, told him what he wanted. And the meat cutters down there said, sure, you can have those, but we want Air Force fatigues. So he went to the Air Force. What do you want? They wanted 45 caliber pistols. Well, now he said, that's a tough one to do. But anyway, he went down, he learned to sign his name in Korean. He got in the Korean induction line and went through, and he kept going through until he had enough pistols. Took him down to the Air Force, got the fatigues, went back to the ration breakdown, got the steak, and we had our steak fry. And needless to say, there's no way anybody was going to get a hold of Luth. He was too valuable, much too valuable. We also had a Indian who was a sergeant, and he was a security guard. He was assigned to security guard. And whatever they say about Indians, when they drank, they get a little wild. I could do anything with the guy. He and I, we got along very well. Again, company clerk, you got to know these people, and you did things for people, and they did things in return. But all the guards slept in one hut, the MPs. So we were down at the NCO club one night, and in came Sergeant of the Guard. They were twins, Sergeant Sullivan. There was two of them. Two of them, actually, the twins. Both sergeants. And one of them came in, and he said, Raj, he said, I got a problem. I said, what is it? He says, Montana was his name. He says, he's gone crazy. He's in the guard hut, and he says, he's thrown every bunk out and everything in there. He's got the whole thing stripped. He's just gone wild. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. And they said, he's got a knife. I said, now that presents a problem. So I went in and I said, Montana, what the hell is going on? And he mumbled something, and I said, do you have a knife? And he says, yes. I said, let me have it. He handed it to me. So I tossed it out to the guard, and I said, now settle down. I said, look what you've done here. I said, you have to sleep here. There's not even a bed in here for you. Okay, Raj. He says, oh, I will. So he settled right down, and they brought everything back in and lived harmoniously. One night he was out in the village, came in, and the sergeant of the guard gave him a hard time when he came in. So he disarmed the sergeant of the guard and put him in a cell. We had a little guardhouse at the main gate. The guard that was on duty, he put him in the cell, took his guns. The officer of the day came in, he took his guns, put him in there. So I said, boy, this guy's in trouble. And they gave him 14 days restriction. But anyway, the CO went out to find out what was going on here. Everybody was locked up. They were supposed to be on guard duty. But
If you hold this up like this, Wayne can focus on it, and maybe you can tell us what the different things are in that.
Okay.
okay, I'll start here. This is our shoulder patch, the Korea War Civil Assistance Command, Korea Civil Assistance Command. These are my collar brass, quartermaster in the United States Army. This is the First Army patch, and that's the patch I wore as a reservist. And that's the 8th Army patch. We were attached to the 8th Army. The medals, this is the National Defense, Korean War Service, this is United Nations Defense, and this is the Republic of Korea War Service Medal. This was just awarded in 1999, and it was awarded by the Korean government. Regulations state that you cannot wear a foreign medal on a United States uniform, and it was relaxed for this medal. This is the Korean Presidential Unit citation that we were allowed to wear. There was never a medal struck until lately. We could wear the ribbon, which is here. The ribbon's one. These two here, one is the New York State Medal of Merit, and one is the New York State Conspicuous Service Star, and that is awarded based on this. This is awarded based on serving in a foreign country.
Now, when and where was the photograph taken?
This photograph was taken in 1953 prior to my shipping to Korea. This shoulder patch is a services patch worn by the various service organizations, of which Quartermaster is one. And these are the ribbons that are worn on a uniform that coincide with the medals. This is my dog tag, and this is my rank insignia. I was a corporal.
All right, well,
And these two bars, those are, each bar is 6 months foreign service. So that indicates a year. I had 16 months.
okay, thank you very much for your interview.